My boss called me his secret weapon while stealing my work for years. Tomorrow, at his biggest launch event, I'm activating the kill switch I hid in his multi-million-dollar product. It all started where so many of these stories do, in a garage. My garage, to be specific. It smelled like sawdust and old paint, but to me and Marcus, it smelled like the future. We were going to change the world. That's what he told me anyway. We were the classic pair. Marcus was the visionary, the salesman. He could walk into a room and command it, painting these incredible pictures with his words, making people see a world that didn't exist yet. He had the charisma, the confidence, the million-dollar smile. I was the architect, the quiet one. The guy who sat in the corner with a laptop turning his grand visions into actual, functional lines of code. He'd pace back and forth, waving his hands, talking about a seamless, intuitive user experience, and I'd just nod and type, building the digital bones of what would become our company, our product, Nexus. Our nights were fueled by cheap pizza and an endless supply of energy drinks. I remember one week we had a huge meeting with our first potential investors. Marcus needed a working demo, something that could show them this wasn't just talk. I didn't sleep for 72 hours straight. I just coded. My fingers felt like they were going to fall off and my eyes burned from staring at the screen. But when it was done, it was beautiful. It was a perfect, elegant piece of software. It worked. Marcus walked into that meeting, my laptop in his hand, and he didn't just walk out with a check. He walked out with our future. He burst back into the garage, his face flushed with victory, and lifted me out of my chair in a hug. "We did it, Leo! We actually did it!" he shouted, waving a check for $50,000 in my face. That night, we sat on the hood of my old car, parked in the driveway, and just looked at the stars. The air was cool and we were both exhausted, but we felt like kings. He put his hand on my shoulder, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. "Listen to me, Leo," he said. "We're partners in this, forever. Don't you ever forget that. You're the engine of this thing. I'm just the driver, the engine." I held on to those words for years. I believed them. I believed in him. I had no idea that to him an engine was just a part of the machine, a part that could always be replaced. The first crack in the foundation appeared 6 months later. We were out of the garage and in a sleek, glass-walled office downtown. We'd hired a small team. Everything felt real, legitimate. We had a make-or-break meeting with a top-tier venture capital firm, the kind of investors who could take our $50,000 dream and turn it into a $50 million reality. I spent a week preparing a deep-dive technical presentation, a 20-page document that detailed the core architecture of Nexus. I broke down every algorithm, every line of code that made our product special. It was my work, my language, my creation. We walked into the boardroom, all mahogany and leather. Marcus was in his element, shaking hands, charming everyone. I was the quiet guy in the corner, the tech nerd. The meeting started and Marcus took the floor. He was magnetic, just like always. But then he started the technical presentation. He was using my slides, my notes, and he kept saying, "Southland, when I designed the core processor, I focused on efficiency. The breakthrough came to me late one night when I realized we could..." I just stared at him. A cold feeling started to creep up my spine. My gaze must have been too intense, because he glanced over at me for a fraction of a second. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, a subtle tilt of his head that said, "Play along." And in that moment, in front of a dozen of the most powerful people in the industry, what could I do? I just sat there, my hands clenched into fists under the table, and let him erase me from my own story. Afterward, in the hallway, the investors were buzzing. They were in. They were completely sold. As soon as they were gone, I turned to Marcus. My voice came out tighter than I intended. "What was that in there?" "I designed the core processor." He put his arm around my shoulder, his smile as easy and confident as ever. "Leo, Leo, Leo," he said, shaking his head like I was a child. "Relax, it's just marketing. It's branding. These guys, they don't invest in a committee. They invest in a person. They need a single confident face for the company, a visionary. That's the game," I wanted to argue, to tell him that we were partners, that the deal was built on my work. But he had a point. I hated it, but he was the face of the company. I was just the engine, so I let it go. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, as long as we were building something great together. But the unease, it didn't go away. A few weeks later, we hired our first senior developer, a brilliant guy named David. He was in my office, and we were whiteboarding a complex problem with the data encryption. David asked me a highly specific question about a protocol I had written years ago. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, Marcus, who had just walked in, jumped in front of me. "What we're doing here, David," Marcus began, picking up a marker and drawing a completely inaccurate diagram on the board, "is leveraging a multi-threaded approach." He went on for 5 minutes, using all the right buzzwords but getting the core concept fundamentally wrong. David looked at me, his expression a perfect mix of confusion and politeness. I just stood there, invisible in my own office, while my business partner confidently explained my own work. Incorrectly. When Marcus finished his little performance and walked out, David turned to me. "So, what he said, that's not actually how it works, is it?" I just erased Marcus's diagram from the board and started again from the beginning, but something had shifted. It was becoming clear that Marcus didn't just want to be the face of the company. He wanted to be the brain, too, even if he had to steal it from me. The final straw came a year later. By then, Nexus was a phenomenon, and Marcus Thorne was a tech world celebrity. I had gotten used to my role in the shadows. I told myself it was fine. The work was what mattered, not the credit. But I was lying to myself. Marcus called an all-hands meeting one Friday afternoon. There was a buzz in the room. He stood at the front, beaming, holding up a copy of Forge magazine. "It's the Bible of our industry. Getting mentioned in Forge is a big deal. Getting a feature is a career maker." "Well, team," Marcus announced, his voice booming with pride, "we did it. We're not just getting a mention. We're getting a full 10-page spread. This is a win for all of us." People started clapping, cheering. I felt a surge of pride myself. We did it. Despite everything, we had built something worthy of this kind of recognition. He said the issue came out next Tuesday. For the next few days, the office was electric. It was all anyone could talk about. On Tuesday morning, I woke up early and went to the newsstand down the street. And there it was. On the top shelf, sitting between all the other major publications, the cover of Forge magazine. It was a picture of Marcus, alone. He was in a sharp, tailored suit, leaning against a server rack, looking thoughtfully into the distance like some kind of tech messiah. And the headline was a gut punch. Marcus Thorne, the man who built the future. My hands were shaking as I paid for the magazine. I took it back to my car and just sat there, staring at his face on the cover. I opened it to the feature article, and I started to read. It was a masterpiece of fiction. The writer described Marcus as a once-in-a-generation coding prodigy. It told the story of how he worked out of his garage, fueled by a singular vision. It even recounted the story of the 72-hour coding marathon to build the first demo. But in this version, it was Marcus who was the hero, subsisting on nothing but energy drinks and raw determination. They were my stories, my breakthroughs. He had taken my life, my work, my entire identity, and just put his name on it. I drove to the office. I didn't speed. I didn't rush. I felt eerily calm. A cold, heavy clarity had settled over me. I walked into his office, a corner suite with a view of the entire city, and dropped the magazine on his desk. He was on the phone, laughing with someone. He looked at the magazine, then up at me, his smile not faltering for a second. "Leo, you saw it! Isn't it incredible?" he said after hanging up. I just stared at him. "A once-in-a-generation coding prodigy, Marcus?" "Really?" He laughed. He actually laughed. He stood up, walked around his massive desk, and put his hand on my shoulder in that old, familiar way. But this time it felt different. It felt possessive. "Leo, it's just a story. It's an article," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is how the game is played. You know that. It's about building a narrative. A brand." "My narrative," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You took my life and made it yours." He sighed like I was a child who just didn't understand. "The company's success is your success, Leo. We're a team, and you're my secret weapon. That's your role. The genius in the back room. Every great man has one. My secret weapon." He said it with a wink. Like it was a compliment. Like being erased, being made a ghost in my own life was some kind of honor. I looked at him, at his perfect suit and his confident smile, and I realized he didn't just steal my work. He genuinely believed it was his now. He had told the lie so many times that it had become his truth. I just nodded. "You're right, Marcus," I said, my voice flat. "I'm your secret weapon." I walked out of his office, but the cold clarity I felt before had been forged into something new, something hard and sharp. He had taken everything from me, and in that moment, I knew I had to take it all back. That night, I went home and did something I should have done years ago. I read my contract. I sat at my kitchen table, the fluorescent light humming overhead, and I went through it line by line. And the genius of Marcus's betrayal became horrifyingly clear. It wasn't just a simple employment agreement. It was an ironclad cage. He had me locked in with a non-disclosure agreement so broad it covered everything short of breathing. A non-compete clause that would prevent me from working in the industry for 5 years. And the intellectual property clause, my God, it stated that anything I created, conceptualized, or even dreamed of while employed by the company belonged to him. Wholly and entirely, I was trapped. I couldn't leave. I couldn't speak out. If I tried to expose him, he would sue me into a crater. He wouldn't just win, he would annihilate me, leaving me with nothing but legal bills and a reputation in tatters. I was his secret weapon, all right? A weapon locked in a box that only he had the key to. I sat there for hours, the pages of the contract spread out on my table, and I felt a kind of despair I'd never known. He had thought of everything. He had played the long game, and I had been a pawn from the very beginning. But then, as the first light of dawn started to creep through my window, the despair began to curdle into something else. Something cold and hard. He had trapped me with paper, with words, with the very system he knew I didn't understand. Fine. I would trap him with the one thing he didn't understand. The one thing he couldn't control because he couldn't even read it. Code. I went to my computer, my fingers moving with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I opened the source code for Nexus, my creation, my life's work. And deep within the millions of lines of elegant, intricate code, I began to build a new cage. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't a bug. It was something more poetic. I called it the Truth Protocol. A kill switch, yes, but not a simple off button. It was a time bomb of my own design, buried so deep in the core architecture that no one would ever find it. It was a ghost in the machine. My ghost. I spent weeks on it, working late into the night, my face illuminated by the glow of the screen. I designed it to be completely untraceable back to me. It would be activated by a complex cryptographic key, a string of code based on a combination of the launch date, the exact time of the global activation, and a personal passphrase only I knew. When triggered, it wouldn't just crash the system. That would be too simple, too easy to dismiss as a technical glitch. No, when triggered, my protocol would hijack the entire Nexus platform. It would sever all user access, lock out every administrator, including Marcus, and replace the sleek, user-friendly interface with something else entirely. Something of my own design. I worked with a quiet, furious determination. Every line of code was a small act of rebellion. Every encrypted function was a piece of the trap I was laying. He thought he owned this world I built? Fine. But he didn't. Know about the secret door I was building into the foundation. A door that only I could open. A door that, when opened, would bring the entire kingdom crashing down. He had trapped me with paper, but I built the cage, and now I would trap him with code. Living a double life was exhausting. By day, I was the quiet, unassuming programmer, the guy who kept his head down and just did the work. By night, I was a saboteur, a ghost in my own machine, meticulously plotting the downfall of the man who had stolen my life. Marcus made it easy to hate him. The success went to his head in the worst way. The quiet confidence he used to have curdled into a loud, obnoxious arrogance. He bought a blood-red Ferrari that he would park in the reserved spot right by the front door. He moved into a penthouse apartment that overlooked the entire city, throwing lavish parties that were featured in society magazines. He was no longer a tech CEO. He was a king, and our office was his court. And I was the court jester. The worst part was the all-hands meetings. Every Friday, he'd gather the entire company into the main conference room. He'd stand at the front, all charm and charisma, talking about our incredible growth, and he always found a way to single me out. I'll never forget one meeting in particular. He was in a great mood, having just closed another massive deal. "And I have to give a special shout-out," he said, scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. He gestured for me to stand up. I felt every eye in the room turn to me. My face grew hot. "A huge thanks to Leo, my code monkey," he boomed, a wide grin on his face. "This guy, he turns my crazy ideas into magic without ever leaving his dark little room." The room filled with laughter. It wasn't mean laughter exactly. It was uncomfortable. My own team, The developers who knew I was the architect of everything, they just stared at their hands, a pained look on their faces. They knew the truth, but they also knew who signed their paychecks. I just stood there, forcing a weak smile, feeling the humiliation wash over me. A code monkey. That's all I was to him. A tool, a resource, a secret weapon to be kept locked away. As we got closer to the global launch of Nexus, I started noticing stability issues. Bugs, flaws in the system that could cause major crashes if they weren't addressed. I brought my concerns to Marcus, my laptop open to show him the data. The server load is too high, I explained, pointing to a graph that showed a terrifying spike. If we launch with this, the whole system could go down. He didn't even look at my screen. He was scrolling through his phone, probably looking at reviews for a new 5-star restaurant. He waved a dismissive hand. Leo, I don't pay you to bring me problems. I pay you to bring me solutions, just make it work. It's not that simple, Marcus, I insisted. We need to delay the launch by a few weeks. Rework the... He finally looked up from his phone, his eyes cold. Delay the launch? Are you insane? The entire world is waiting for this. The investors, the media. We are not delaying anything. Now, are you going to fix it, or do I need to find another code monkey who can? I just stood there, the words catching in my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that he was steering our ship directly into an iceberg, and he was too arrogant to even look at the map. But I just nodded. I'll handle it, I said, my voice barely a whisper. And I did. I went back to my office and I played my part. I nodded along in meetings. I acted subservient. I let him call me his code monkey. I let him dismiss my concerns. And every single time he did, every condescending comment, every dismissive wave of his hand, I documented it. I saved the emails. I recorded the conversations. I was building my case, one humiliating moment at a time. He thought he was putting me in my place, but all he was really doing was handing me the ammunition I would need to burn his kingdom to the ground. The kill switch was my insurance policy, my ace in the hole. But as the launch date got closer, I realized that simply destroying Nexus wasn't enough. People would call it a hack, a catastrophic failure. Marcus would play the victim, raise more money, and rebuild. And I would still be the ghost. The anonymous code monkey who failed to protect his creation. No, I didn't just want to destroy the product. I wanted to destroy the myth. The myth of Marcus Thorne, the boy genius. To do that, I needed more than a kill switch. I needed a confession. I needed proof. So I started building my digital dossier, a secret archive of the truth. My methods were simple, but effective. I started screen recording my video calls with Marcus. He'd be in his penthouse, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand, and I'd be in my small apartment, a quiet recording software running in the background. I'd ask him specific technical questions about the Nexus core, knowing he couldn't answer them. Marcus, I'm looking at the predictive algorithm, I'd say, and I'm thinking we could optimize the data flow by... And then I'd trail off, waiting. He'd just laugh and wave his hand. Leo, that's your world. I'm just the big picture guy. You handle the ones and zeros. I'll handle the millions and billions. Click. I'd save the recording. Another piece for the collection. Another nail for his coffin. I became a digital archaeologist, digging through the ruins of our shared history. I went back to our earliest days, to the emails we exchanged when we were still in my garage. And there it was, in black and white. Emails from me, with timestamps, sending him the first ever builds of the Nexus source code. Emails where I explained the core architecture line by line. Proof that I wasn't just the engine, I was the architect, the builder, the creator. I saved every single one. I took screenshots of the original source code files. The metadata clearly showing author Leo Miles. I was reclaiming my history, one timestamp at a time. The most damning piece of evidence came from a phone call. He called me late one night, a little drunk and feeling sentimental. He was talking about the upcoming launch, about how big it was going to be. You know, Leo, he slurred, his voice thick with a cheap, self-serving nostalgia. You really are my secret weapon. The best decision I ever made was keeping you in the background. No one can ever know. It's our little secret. I felt my hand tighten on the phone. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed calm. You're right, Marcus, I said. Our little secret. I hung up the phone and immediately saved the audio recording. I had it. His own voice, admitting the entire conspiracy, but a collection of files wasn't enough. I needed a delivery system, a stage, so I built one. I bought a domain name, a simple anonymous URL, and I started building a website. It was a simple, clean site. White background, black text. At the top, a single headline, The Truth About Nexus, and below it, I began to assemble my dossier. The screen recorded video calls, the early emails, the screenshots of the source code, the audio recording of him calling me his secret weapon. I uploaded everything, encrypting each file, building a digital monument to his lies. This website was now the payload. The kill switch wouldn't just be a weapon of destruction. It would be a signpost. When I flipped the switch, it wouldn't just bring his empire down. It would point the entire world to this single, hidden corner of the internet, where the truth was waiting to be seen. All I needed now was to make sure the right person would be there to see it first. Having the evidence was one thing. Making sure the world saw it was another. I couldn't just release it myself. I'd be a disgruntled employee, a bitter, jealous nobody trying to tear down a visionary. Marcus's PR machine would bury me in a day. I needed an amplifier. Someone credible. Someone feared. And in our industry, there was only one person who fit that description. Chloe Zhang. She was an investigative journalist for Tech Truth, a website notorious for breaking the biggest stories and taking down the biggest names. She was brilliant, relentless, and she hated frauds, but I couldn't just walk up to her. Marcus had eyes and ears everywhere. So I went back to the shadows. I created a new encrypted email account, something completely untraceable. The username was simple, Nexus Ghost. My hands were shaking as I typed out the first message. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was the point of no return. The email was short. Subject: The Truth About Marcus Thornhams. Zhang, you don't know me, but you know the man on the cover of Forge magazine. The story you read is a lie. Marcus Thorne didn't build Nexus, I did, and I have proof. I hesitated for a long moment, my finger hovering over the attach button. I had to give her something. Something undeniable. Something that would hook her and not let go. I chose a short 30-second audio clip from one of my recorded calls with Marcus. It was from a few weeks ago. In the clip, you could hear me trying to explain a complex server issue, and then you could hear Marcus, his voice slick with arrogance, cut me off. He laughs, a loud, dismissive sound. Leo, you might as well be speaking Greek. I can't even read the code, man. That's your job. Just make the damn thing work. I can't even read the code. I attached the file and hit send. The whoosh sound of the email leaving my outbox felt like a gunshot in the silent room. For 2 days, there was nothing. I checked the anonymous email account every 10 minutes, my stomach in knots. I started to think she'd just deleted it, that she thought it was a prank. Marcus was a tech darling. Going after him was a huge risk. Why would she believe a ghost? Then on the third day, a reply appeared. It was just one line, from Chloe Zhang, subject, The Truth About Marcus Thorne intriguing. But an anonymous audio clip isn't enough to risk my career. I need more. My heart leaped. She'd taken the bait. She was listening. I typed back immediately, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I have everything. Videos, original source code, emails, a complete timeline. But I can't give it to you yet. If I do, he'll know it was me. He'll bury me before the truth ever sees the light of day. Her reply came back in minutes. So what's your plan? This was the moment. The final piece of the trap. Be at the global launch event for Nexus next month. When the time is right, you'll have everything you need. You'll know when the story breaks. I hit send and then logged out of the email account. I wouldn't check it again. The fuse was lit. I had armed the kill switch, built the dossier of truth, and now I had primed the media. All the pieces were in place. All I had to do now was survive the next few weeks and wait for the perfect moment to burn it all down. The night before the launch was surreal. Marcus had rented out the top floor of a skyscraper hotel for a pre-launch party. The whole company was there, buzzing with a nervous electric energy. The room was all glass and chrome, with panoramic views of the city lights glittering below. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and impossibly small appetizers. It felt like a scene from a movie, a celebration of a victory that hadn't happened yet. I stood in the corner, nursing a glass of sparkling water, just trying to blend in. I felt detached, like I was watching everything from a great distance. Every laugh, every toast, every confident prediction of our success felt like a scene in a play where only I knew the final act was a tragedy. Around 10 o'clock, Marcus clinked a glass with a spoon, and a hush fell over the room. He climbed onto the small stage the event planners had set up, a flute of champagne in his hand, a triumphant grin on his face. He was in his element. The king surveying his kingdom. Team, he began, his voice booming. Family, look at this. Look at where we are. From a dusty garage to the top of the world. Tomorrow we don't just launch a product. We launch a new era, and we did it together. As a family, people cheered. He had them in the palm of his hand. He went on for a few more minutes, thanking the marketing team, the sales team, the investors, and then his eyes found me in the corner. But there's one person, he said, his voice dropping into a more intimate, conspiratorial tone, who I couldn't have done this without, the man behind the curtain. My secret weapon. Leo, get up here! My blood ran cold. He was gesturing for me, waving me onto the stage. Every head in the room turned to look at me. I had no choice. I walked through the crowd, my legs feeling like lead, and climbed the 2 small steps onto the stage. He threw a heavy arm around my shoulder, pulling me close. He smelled like expensive champagne and self-satisfaction. He held his glass high. And to this guy, he shouted to the crowd. My secret weapon. For every genius idea I had, he was there to do the typing. The room erupted in laughter. It was a good line. A funny joke. I saw my own team, the developers who knew the truth, force a smile. I just stood there, the fake smile plastered on my face, feeling the weight of his arm on my shoulder like a physical restraint. He was celebrating his own fraud. On a stage in front of everyone, he was reducing my life's work to a punchline. And in that moment, any lingering doubt, any shred of sentimentality I might have had for the man I once called my partner, evaporated. There was nothing left but a cold, hard certainty. He thought I was his secret weapon. He had no idea I was a loaded gun. I went home early. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I just slipped out while Marcus was holding court, surrounded by his admirers. I walked into my quiet apartment, the laughter of the party still ringing in my ears. I didn't turn on the lights. I just went to my desk, opened my laptop, and the glow of the screen illuminated my face. It was time. My fingers moved across the keyboard, typing in the final activation sequence for the truth protocol. The long, complex string of characters that would serve as the key. I reviewed the code one last time. Everything was in place. The timer was set. The payload was ready. All that was left to do was to wait for the man on the stage to light the fuse. The day of the launch felt electric. The convention center was massive, a cathedral of glass and steel. Thousands of people were there, journalists, investors, tech enthusiasts, all buzzing with anticipation. Giant banners with Marcus's face hung from the ceiling, his smiling image looking down on us all. Millions more were watching the live stream, the viewer count ticking up into the stratosphere on the monitors scattered around the hall. This wasn't just a product launch. It was a coronation. I found my assigned seat in the 3rd row, close enough to see the sweat on the presenter's brows, but far enough to remain anonymous. My heart was a hammering drum against my ribs. I had my phone in my hand, my thumb resting on the icon of the custom app I'd built. A simple black square, one tap. That's all it would take. The event started. Pounding music, a laser light show. It was a spectacle, a circus, and Marcus was the ringmaster. Before the main launch, they held an awards ceremony. The host, a famous tech journalist, went on and on about innovation and vision, and then he announced the Innovator of the Year award. An award for a singular talent whose vision has not only built a revolutionary product, but has redefined an entire industry. The award goes to Marcus Thorne. The room exploded in applause. A standing ovation. Marcus walked onto the stage, his face a perfect mask of humble surprise. He took the gleaming crystal award, held it up to the light, and I saw a single perfect tear roll down his cheek. The cameras zoomed in. The crowd ate it up. He stepped up to the podium, his voice thick with fake emotion. Wow, he whispered, shaking his head. I don't know what to say. This journey, it's been a lonely one. So many late nights alone, just me and the code, trying to build something that mattered. My stomach turned. I could feel the anger, hot and sharp, rising in my throat. He was using my words, my story, my 72-hour sleepless nights, and wearing them like a costume. He finished his speech to another roar of applause, and then turned to the giant screen behind him. It lit up with the sleek, beautiful interface of Nexus. My interface. The one I had designed in my garage. And now, he boomed, his voice echoing through the massive hall. For the moment you've all been waiting for, it is my incredible honor to officially launch Nexus to the world. A giant glowing button appeared on the screen that read Global Launch. The crowd was on its feet. The music swelled. The lights pulsed. This was it. The peak of his arrogance. The top of the mountain he had climbed on my back. I looked down at my phone. My thumb was hovering over the black square. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I could hear the countdown from the stage. 10. 9. 8. My whole life, my entire creation, it all came down to this. 7. 6. 5. He was a god on that stage, and I was just a ghost in the crowd. 4. 3. 2. He raised his hand, ready to press the button, ready to claim his kingdom. 1. My thumb came down, just as Marcus's finger made contact with the giant launch button on the screen. The world went quiet. The triumphant music cut out. The pulsing lights died. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. On the massive screen behind him, the sleek Nexus interface flickered once, twice, and then dissolved into black. For a split second, there was nothing. Just a void. And then 2 words appeared, typed out in a simple, clean, white font. Nexus. Another word appeared next to it. By Leo Miles. A confused murmur spread through the crowd. Who was Leo Miles? I could see the investors in the front row turning to each other, shrugging. Marcus just stared at the screen, his perfect smile frozen on his face, his brain clearly not comprehending what was happening. And then, my dossier began to unfold. First, a screenshot of the original source code. The metadata clearly visible. Author, Leo Miles. Date created 4 years ago. Then another file appeared. An audio player. And his own voice, drunk and arrogant, filled the auditorium. You know, Leo, you really are my secret weapon. No one can ever know. It's our little secret. The murmuring in the room grew louder. People were pulling out their phones, starting to record. I saw Chloe Zhang, the journalist, standing on a chair, her face a mask of intense focus. The screen changed again. An email. Dated from our garage days. From me to him. The full breakdown of the core architecture. My architecture, then a video. A screen recording of one of our calls. Marcus on screen. Leo, you might as well be speaking Greek. I can't even read the code, man. That's your job, the room erupted. It wasn't just murmurs anymore. It was a roar. The investors in the front row were on their feet, their faces red with fury. The livestream chat, which was being displayed on smaller screens around the hall, was a waterfall of pure, unfiltered chaos. And Marcus, he just stood there, frozen. The color had drained from his face. His confident smile had melted into a slack-jawed mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He looked like a man who had just watched his own ghost walk through a wall. He tried to speak. He tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the now silent hall. We seem to have been hacked, he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. This is a malicious attack. But no one was listening. No one was buying it. The evidence was too specific. Too personal. Too true. The kill switch wasn't just a hack. It was a confession. And I had just made him deliver it to the entire world. The screen changed one last time. A simple web page appeared with the headline, The Truth About Nexus, and a single link, click here for the full story. I watched as every single person in that room, from the investors in the front row to the journalists in the back, raised their phones and pointed them at the screen. The truth was out, and there was nowhere left for him to hide. The chaos was immediate. It was like a dam had broken. The investors in the front row, these titans of industry, were on their feet, screaming into their phones, their faces a mask of pure rage. I saw one of them throw his Innovator of the Year program on the floor and stomp on it. Security guards rushed the stage, not to protect Marcus, but to get him out of sight. They grabbed him by the arms and he just went limp, a puppet with its strings cut. He was still muttering about being hacked as they dragged him off stage, his expensive shoes scraping against the floor. The livestream feed to the world abruptly cut to black. The house lights came on, harsh and unforgiving, revealing the panicked, confused faces of thousands of people who had just witnessed the public execution of a tech god. And in the middle of it all, I saw Chloe Zhang. She was standing on a chair, her phone to her ear, dictating her story with a calm, focused intensity. She wasn't just reporting the news. She was making it. Before I had even made it to the exit, my phone buzzed. It was a news alert from Tech Truth. The headline was a thing of beauty. The secret weapon strikes back. Marcus Thorne's Empire of Lies. Chloe's article was already live, complete with the link to my dossier. She had published it within minutes. The story was breaking, not just in that room, but across the entire internet. The world now knew the truth. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I just slipped out a side exit, the alarms and the shouting fading behind me. I walked out into the cool night air and just breathed. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt quiet. The roar of injustice that had been deafening me for years had finally gone silent. I walked the 10 blocks back to my apartment. I didn't take a cab. I just wanted to feel the pavement under my feet, to be one of the anonymous faces in the crowd. As I walked, my phone buzzed again. A stock market alert. The company's stock, which had been soaring in anticipation of the launch, had plummeted to zero in after-hours trading. It was worthless. Gone. In the time it took me to walk a few blocks, a billion-dollar company had been erased. When I got home, I went to my computer. I logged into the Nexus server one last time. I found the lines of code, my truth protocol, my ghost in the machine. And with a few keystrokes, I deleted it, wiped it clean. It had served its purpose. My work was done. I shut down the computer and just sat there in the dark, listening to the distant sound of the city. I knew there would be consequences, lawsuits, threats, the end of my career maybe, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt a sense of peace, knowing I had finally reclaimed the one thing Marcus could never steal: the truth. The weeks that followed were a storm of lawyers, reporters, and online commentary. But for the first time, I wasn't at the center of it. Marcus was. His fall was as spectacular as his rise. He was buried in an avalanche of lawsuits from investors, from employees, from partners. The man who was on the cover of Forge magazine became a pariah overnight. His name, once a symbol of innovation, was now a synonym for fraud. I'd see headlines about him sometimes, a picture of him leaving a courthouse, his face pale and drawn, a ghost of the tech god he once was. He had lost everything. Not just the money, but the one thing he truly cared about, the applause. I faced my own legal threats, of course. For a while, it looked like I might be sued for sabotaging the company. But public opinion was on my side. Chloe's articles, backed by my irrefutable proof, painted a clear picture of exploitation. I wasn't a saboteur. I was a whistleblower. And in the court of public opinion, I had already won. No serious charges were ever filed. A few months later, when the dust had finally started to settle, I did one last thing. I went back to the source, the original Nexus code. The beautiful, elegant architecture I had built in my garage all those years ago. It was still mine. Not legally, perhaps, but morally. And I decided it was time to set it free. I posted the entire source code to an open-source platform, available for anyone to use, to build on, to improve, for free. In the notes, I wrote a simple message. Good ideas shouldn't be kept in a cage. This belongs to everyone now. It was my final act of defiance against Marcus and everything he stood for. He wanted to own it, to control it, to put his name on it. I gave it away. I let it become a part of the community, a tool for creation, not a monument to one man's ego. Today, my life is quiet, and I like it that way. I work out of a small, collaborative workspace with a handful of other developers. It's not a glass tower. It's a brick building with a leaky coffee maker and a whiteboard covered in crazy ideas. It feels like my old garage. It feels like home. I'm not a secret weapon anymore. I'm just a programmer, a creator, an architect. I was working on a new project this morning, just sketching out some ideas, when an email popped up on my screen. It was from one of the biggest tech firms in the world. I felt that old, familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach as I opened it. But the email wasn't what I expected. They weren't trying to buy my new idea. They weren't trying to hire me as an employee. The email was simple. It said they were impressed with my work, with my integrity, and they wanted to know if I'd be interested in a partnership as an equal. I read the word over and over, equal. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. A real smile. Then I closed the email and got back to work. So, here's my question for you. I chose to burn everything to the ground to expose the truth. But was it justice, or was it just a different kind of revenge? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you believe that sometimes you have to tear down the old to build something better, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from Reddit Unpacked.